So hi, everybody. Thanks, everybody who really spoke. I could relate to every single person. First, I just wanted to say, Winston, you know, I just want to acknowledge how amazing you are and how many lives you've already changed and how you helped me in preparing for this tonight. I just want to really tell you how much you are admired and respected, and thank you. So I could relate to everybody tonight in some way, and I figure, you know, really we all have our stories, and I guess the stories are all different, but the feelings are all the same. And I discovered that when I walked into a detox center 22 years ago, and I realized that the shame and the guilt and the fear and the everything that went with the way I was feeling at that time. I remember going in there and thinking, how on earth did I land up in a place like this? And I remember saying to some of the guys who were drug addicts, you know, you might have come from Maine and Hastings and I might have come from a Persian carpet, but the feelings are exactly the same. So I might have been a little more privileged, but nothing was different. You know, we all have our stories. So just to start at the beginning, just give you a little bit of foundation of where I come from. So I was born in South Africa, and I was very blessed because I was born into a very, very nice family. I was born into a Jewish family, and you know, of course I know a lot of things now that I didn't know then. So, you know, I always felt quite blessed in terms of the fact my parents really loved us, my sister and I, and you know, financially they spoiled us, and we had nannies and, you know, the whole spiel. My parents had a retail business, and we lived a really nice life. We traveled, and my parents were very social and had lots of guests, and you know, I used to love people coming over, and I was a very happy, spirited person. I don't really know how else to describe that. I always had a happy spirit. Thank God for that, because that little flicker of spirit kept me going through my really hard times. So what I can remember as a very young child, I can remember probably from about 5 years old to 10 years old. My sister and I both had our birthdays in December. And so my parents would have a luncheon to celebrate both our birthdays in our big, huge garden. And of course, it would be mostly their friends. And they'd have these umbrellas and tables and, you know, people coming. Every single year, for those 5 years, I would be in the bathroom throwing up. And I just remember that so clearly, and knowing every year that it was kind of going to happen, as young as I was. And I wouldn't have had words at that time to be able to explain how I felt. But what I realized in retrospect was that I always had this huge hole inside of me. And even though I loved people, I was always around a lot of people, I always felt lonely on the inside. And as everybody was talking tonight about the, you know, the head and the heart and things going on in here, and I sort of got this idea, and I don't remember anyone telling me, but I got this idea that unless I was perfect, I wasn't lovable. And so I used to try to be perfect, and you know, whatever that meant in my mind to be perfect, I used to do. So I was very good at sport, and I was captain of this team and captain of that team, and so, you know, it wasn't that I didn't have people around me. I was popular, and I was always kind of a leader, but I had this hole, and I would be so lonely on the inside. I used to play a lot of tennis, and I remember in the afternoons after school, I would go and hit the ball up against the wall to practice, and I remember so many days doing that, and this feeling inside of me thinking, why do I feel so lonely inside? and thinking to myself, I wish I could just be in someone else's body and mind for a day just to see how they feel, because it didn't look like other people were feeling the way I was feeling. But here I went along and continued to struggle to be happy and to show everybody that I was happy and that I was perfect. Otherwise, I wasn't lovable. And so I wasn't academic and I didn't do very well at school. However, because I was good at sport, I kind of got my esteem from that. And I always loved fun, and I've always been a very light-hearted kind of person. I still am. And so I used to kid around a lot, but it didn't take away from how I felt on the inside, and nobody knew because I didn't know the words to explain. So just to go forward from there, as a young teenager, my mom and my sister were going on a holiday, and my mom decided that instead of staying home with the nannies and my dad, who would be working late hours, she would put me in some very close family friend's home to stay for the 10 days or whatever it was that she would be away. And I was very excited because this family was very close to our family. The husband, the father of this couple, was our family doctor. And I was very comfortable with them. They'd been into our home many, many times, socially and as our doctor. You know, in those days, doctors did house calls. And so that's what happened. I moved into their house, and I had my own bedroom. And lo and behold, I believe it was the first night I was there, that doctor came into my room, and I wasn't really perturbed by that because he had, you know, been in my bedroom many times when I wasn't well. And he came and sat on the side of the bed, and he put his hand under the blankets and into my pajamas and touched me very inappropriately. And I was a very naive little girl. I had been raised in a family with just one sister, and I went to an all-girls school, so I'd never really experienced anything to do with boys. And from that second, when I think back now, you know, I might as well have been put into a jail cell, locked the door, and thrown away the key, because for the next 30 years, I had to survive and continue on this path of showing everybody that everything was fine. This abuse, by the way, just in case I forget to mention, went on for 16 years, and into my marriage even. And I, like Daniel was talking about, it was a total people pleaser, which went with my perfection and wanting to be loved. I would be saying yes when I meant no, because I just wanted to be loved at any cost. And the confusion that caused in my mind was indescribable. A huge part of me knew that what was happening was completely wrong, but the other side would tell me that I was really special and that this revered Jewish doctor in Cape Town was attracted to me, and all this kind of garbage, right? And so I had this kind of two different minds. It was like, this is wrong, and I'm full of shame, and I'm taking on this man's shame, and I'm so filled with shame that now I've got to live a life where I've got something extra to act about, and I didn't want anybody to know because I was so afraid that somebody would find out and I would be blamed. So I'll never forget going to school the next morning, and I think I can't even remember, I think it was in grade 7. No, different in South Africa, standard 7, which is grade 9, I think, yeah. And I remember not being able to focus or concentrate. Basically, I couldn't concentrate again for many, many years. I just would be in another world in my mind, and so confused. And anyway, after staying in that house, I went home, and I really couldn't look my parents in the eye. I couldn't look anybody. My 3 closest girlfriends, couldn't look them in the eye. And of course, you know, we all know what secrets can do to us, and that was the very first secret I had, and I knew I was going to keep that secret. You know, what I learned afterwards is that we're only as sick as our secrets, and it really did make me very, very sick. But I put on a good act, and I went through life best I could. But as it's been described tonight, you know, I disconnected, I was lost. I really wasn't living inside of myself at all. So I had no, I just didn't know what my purpose is. I had no goals. I was kind of living next to myself. And it's very strange when I look at things now. But on the outside, you know, I got married to a very, very nice man. I was very blessed and had 2 children. And, you know, here I am marrying this man and he doesn't have a clue. This man becomes his doctor and our family doctor. And of course, you know, this is going on and I can't tell anybody. And so you can only imagine what life was like. You know, it was just, when I think about it now, it's just, I can't believe that I actually even got through it. You know, I didn't necessarily get through it that well, but I got through it. And, you know, the worst part was that I just wanted someone to notice and to see that I had gone from, you know, that I had just, my parents, God bless them, they were wonderful, but they certainly didn't teach us how to take care of ourselves emotionally. Like they just didn't. They didn't know. And so I had no boundaries. And as I said, I just did whatever I had to do to be loved. And so I'll just fast forward. We came to live in Canada in 1987. And actually, just the lighter side of the story is that I really didn't know what had happened to me. I didn't have the phrase sexual abuse. I'd never heard that phrase, and I had no idea what it was called. So I just, I don't know what I thought. But when we got to Vancouver, you know, it was hard. It was a new country, and I didn't know people. And now, you know, I was again trying to live this life of being so lonely on the inside with this big secret and trying to show the world that I'm fine and everything's great. And of course it wasn't, and trying to raise 2 children. My son was born with a deformity, so I'm trying to handle that, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so dysfunctional I was, and still putting on that act. I really should have been in the movies, because I really did act I did a good job in acting. No one really knew. And yeah, so I discovered Oprah Winfrey on television. I can't leave this out because my friends all know about it. And I became like obsessed with Oprah. And she talked about sexual abuse, and that was the very first time I'd heard that phrase. And I was so grateful. And I remember sitting on the floor watching her in my bedroom and saying to myself, oh, that's what happened to me. That's what happened to me. Now I know. And I remember saying, I know now that it happened to me, but I'm still never going to tell anybody. And that was probably around 1989 or something like that. And I watched Oprah religiously. And my children, you know, would tell me, you love Oprah more than you love us. And today my license plate is Oprah. And I had a dog called Oprah. And yeah, she did change my life. And I'm very grateful for that. However, eventually, as God works in amazing ways, a woman came into my life in about 93. She was from South Africa, and I knew of her. And she came with her husband to Vancouver, and she had been told by somebody in Cape Town, why don't you call up Patsy Bernstein? And so she did. We became good friends. And she was a very spiritual kind of woman and very deep, and I'd never really met anyone like her before. And lo and behold, she was the first person I told this big secret to. And it was quite amazing because she came into my life, she let me out of the jail cell, because that's how it felt, and then basically she went back to South Africa. And it was like that God had just brought her here to let me out of the jail. And off she went. And so now the secret was out to her, but no one else. But from that day on, I started drinking heavily because I had so much pain, I didn't know how else to deal with it. And I'd always been a drinker, but a totally social drinker. And I'd never used alcohol to numb my pain, I just drank socially. But now I started using it to change how I felt because I just couldn't face the shame. And it was kind of even worse now that it was out. It kind of started eating me up even more. And so I just wanted to stress about that feeling inside of the emptiness and the loneliness, because it really was severe. And anyway, to cut the story short, my husband noticed that I was drinking, and he eventually said to me, something's happening, something's going on. I'm not leaving home today until you tell me what's going on. So it had to come out. So it came out about the sexual abuse. I got into therapy, and I continued the drinking, and it was bad. I was drinking from the minute I woke up in the morning. When my kids went to school, my husband went to work, I would start drinking. And I would literally sit in the chair with my little Oprah dog on my side and take a bottle of scotch, and I would drink that half a bottle. I would throw up, have a sleep, and then start again. And that's what I was doing every day, because the pain was so bad, and I was full of fear and anxiety and all those emotions that we've talked about tonight. So eventually, in therapy, my therapist said to me, if you're going to continue drinking, we can't go on with therapy. And she was an expert in sexual abuse. That's why I'd been recommended to see her. And she was like my life. I mean, I looked forward to every week to going to see her. I was with her for 6 years, every single week. And she really, really was my ally. She was my, she helped me in so many ways. Anyway, she suggested I go into recovery, and I found I won't mention the name because I'm not allowed to, but I got into a 12-step program, and I walked in, as I mentioned earlier, into the doors of detox center, and thank God I've never had a drink from that day to this, and that's 22 years ago. And so that was the start, of a long, long journey of recovery. I had no idea that the drinking was only a symptom, and that obviously I couldn't get well until I'd stopped the drinking, but it really wasn't my problem, it was my solution, and then it became the problem. So once that was put away, I had a lot of work to do. And so I was 4 months sober, and I completely lost my mind and started running in the street in pajamas and doing crazy things, just crazy. Literally going down to the Waterfront Hotel at 4 in the morning, driving down there, and saying, I've come to see Oprah Winfrey. And the guy at the desk says, we don't have anybody with that name here. And stuff like that. It was just bizarre. And of course, I was diagnosed with severe bipolar disorder. And, never dreaming that I would be suffering from mental illness. It was severe, really, really severe. I was in bad, bad shape. And this psychotic, manic episode was, you can imagine what it was like for my children and for everybody involved. So I landed up in the psych ward. The first time I was at UBC for 3 months. And unlike Michelle, thank God, I can only say good things about what was done for me. And I was, as I say, I was in there a long, long time, and I was on a lot of medication. And I had a fantastic psychiatrist. And for the next 5 years, I was in that psych ward every year, either depressed or manic, depressed, manic, and I was literally on 28 pills a day. And I was shaking, but I needed them to get me through that time. When I was 5 years sober, and my last time, and in April I'd been in the psych ward, I finally turned to somebody in my recovery program and I said, could you help me with the work in AA? I can't go on like this any longer. I'm really not in good shape. And she said, yes, I will help you. So she did. We did the work, as you all know, about the 12 steps, and we sat and we worked on those 12 steps for 9 months. And this wonderful lady taught me to pray. And she was a Catholic, and I kind of was like a bit embarrassed because I was a Jew and she was talking about Jesus, and I was like, oh, I don't want to hear about that. And and I said, but I told you I would do whatever you tell me, so I'm going to listen to you. So we prayed together, and she really gave me a lot of time, and we did have to go through a lot of my inside stuff about what I'd collected over the years and the resentments and all of that stuff that we hold on to before I could ever sort of open myself up to any sort of spiritual experience. But that's what happened. So I worked on my stuff for 9 months with her, and lo and behold, I had this amazing spiritual awakening, and I'd never felt that way before. And suddenly it dawned on me that, wow, you know, that's the hole I've had my whole life. That, of course, I had no foundation because I had no God. No one ever told me about God. My parents, you know, were kind of traditional in a Jewish fashion, but there was no God. And I just thought God was just like a word. There was nothing more to it. It was just, there's a God, but it's like, it's the sky. I don't know what, I didn't think about it much. But anyway, I'd never felt this way before, and I suddenly realized that this was filling me in a way that I'd never been filled before. And so I was so grateful. And from that day on, I'd never been back to the psych ward, so I'm very grateful for that. So I went on and I started a business, and I was really doing nicely. I'd never worked before. This was I should mention that my husband and I separated after 26 years of marriage, and that was another huge difficulty for me. I'd never worked, and I'd never been alone, and I got married from home, and so there was a lot to go through. But you know, I got a lot of help, a lot of help. So after I'd been sober about 14 years, I felt myself drifting away again and getting back into that hole. And once again, I had to reach out and tell someone, and she said to me, well, here's a CD that you should listen to of some woman who has been through what you've been through, the sexual abuse, but she's also very much a follower of God, and maybe you should listen. So I did, and you know, all I can say, you know, I'm certainly not here to preach to anybody or anything like that, but what has brought me from that bizarre life and those terrible years, and through the last 22 years, all my work has been, and the last 5 years or 6 years now has been my relationship with God through Jesus. And yes, I'm a Jew and I follow Jesus, and and honestly, I just want to say that, you know, I used to think religion was like so scary and weird and I don't know what. And I think it is still. I'm not religious. But what I found was a place that I could go where they teach us about a relationship with God through Jesus. And it's like, you know, the church I go to, the pastor is like a life coach, kind of, but he teaches us from the Bible. And the Bible has got everything in that I need. And so, you know, today I'm here to say that, you know, I don't suffer from mental illness. I'm not saying that I don't have some days where I'm really lonely still, or my head tells me I'm lonely, but I have people in my lives that are following the same path, and we all help each other. And you know, I have God to turn to. I'm not alone anymore. And you know, I don't want to sound weird and preachy, but you know, if anybody is here tonight and perhaps you have a secret or you have been through stuff similar to mine, you know, I just want to say to you, keeping that secret was the worst thing I ever did. And I know it sounds weird too to say to you that I'm not sorry about what happened to me, because it's brought me to where I am right now talking to you. And if I hadn't gone through all that, I'd never be in the place today I am with God and so on, and have the life that I have, and I'm so grateful for that. So we all have our stories, and we walk through them the best we can, and we get the help and so on. But there is help out there, and we all need to help each other, and there's so much professional help out there. And for anybody who might need that, reach out and don't keep the secrets. It will fester and make you really sick. So yeah, I'm just so grateful to be able to share my story with you, and grateful again for Winston. And yeah, just want to thank you all.